Okay, so this panel discussion will be moderated by Gavin Davids. He's the editor of CPI Media Group for the Big Project magazine. Gavin has had an extensive experience in the years at the GCC construction industry, having traveled around the globe and interviewed some of the industry's biggest players. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Gavin Davids.
So, without further ado, can I welcome on stage Sohail from Autodesk? Thank you. Andy from RMJM. Sean from SSH is, there he is. And Sean from ALEC. Okay. And Jeff from KEO. Thank you. Thanks, Sean. All right, guys, so thanks for joining us over here today. And what we'll do before we start, talking about things is we can just go around and have you guys introduce yourselves to the audience and, tell us a little bit about what you guys do at your respective companies. And then we'll jump straight into the discussion. Yeah, so.
Hi, my name is Jeff Batesall. I'm the Chief Strategy and Implementation Officer for KEO International Consultants. We are a consultancy in the AEC industry here across the region. And that's it.
Hi, I'm Andy Shaw. I'm an Associate Director at RMJM International here in Dubai, working on various projects at the moment. And I'm also the leader of our IT group and our BIM strategy. So we're trying to push every project a bit further with our internal BIM team. And I've done a lot of parametric modeling when I was a bit younger, but now I think more meetings and spreadsheets.
Morning, everyone. My name is Sohail Arfat. I am responsible for consulting services at Autodesk. I've been evangelizing BIM for the last 14 years across the globe, and most of my career has been with Autodesk.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Sean Dewhurst. I'm the Change and Technology Director for SSH, another consultancy from Kuwait. I'm actually quite new to this sector. I've got 20 years in banking, so please go easy on me, Gavin.
Hi, I'm Sean McHugh from ALEC. We're a main contractor operating in the UAE, Oman, and Qatar.
Okay, great. So let's jump straight into this then. What I wanted to find out, obviously Matt mentioned during his presentation about the fact that His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum had, announced that 25% of Dubai's buildings would be 3D printed by the year 2030. I just wanted to get your take on what this actually means for the AEC industry and, the construction industry as a whole. Not just in the UAE, but also for the region. Maybe, Andy, you could start us off with this?
Well, I'd like to start by saying that it's very important for construction that there's a support from the public sector. Because in the commercial world, especially when it comes to big, expensive things like building, the profit margins mean that innovation is very expensive. And you have to really afford innovation and justify it, you have to have a lot behind you, which is why the role of universities and the government support is vital. It's different with software, because software is cheaper and quicker. Companies can be innovative in the use of software more easily. But when it comes to building real things, having the backup of the government that's willing to take the risks and try new things, start small, scale up, is very important. And because so many buildings here have some kind of relationship to the government, I think it's great that they're really pushing for it. And we're going to start seeing incremental changes until there's support there that it is the most quickest and cost-effective way to do it, and it's replaced the current way of doing it.
Okay. And Jeff, do you have anything to add to that? Obviously with KEO, you've got a regional focus as well. So how do you think this is going to sort of influence the rest of the region?
Well, it's obviously an ambitious goal. It's good to set these things. I think technology can be disrupted very easily. I think industries have different friction points, though, and it's a little more difficult for an entire industry to start leapfrogging, as you might do with a technology platform. Are the contracts keeping up with the technology? Are the interrelationships in that sense going to be quick enough to allow us to transform at that rate? You know, time will tell. I think the technology is in advance of a lot of the other aspects right now, and we'll see if everything else can catch up.
Okay. And Sean, as a contractor, you're directly affected by something like this with the 3D printing strategy. Does this make your job maybe a little bit easier or a little bit tougher? I mean,
Look, I think if we see it start to become a reality, I think we'll start to feel it more. But I think the problem we're going to have is unless it's driven from the right place, we're not really going to see it happen. So markets will always dictate the methods we use for construction. Construction is one of those industries that fundamentally hasn't changed for a long, long time. We see innovation in design, we see innovation in technology, but when it gets onto the ground, that's where you struggle to realize change. And the market will always dictate how we go about things. So as long as it's cheaper to build things with labor, it's going to happen that way. So if clients, designers start to specify and drive things from the front end of projects and specify that that's what they want to see, then you'll start to see it come in, because it is going to initially be a much more expensive process.
okay. And Sean, do you have anything else you'd like?
Yeah, I think Matt Willis, earlier on this morning, had a couple of quite indicative pictures up that show the challenge ahead. On the one hand, you've got the video of the Chinese hotel being built, which we've all seen put up in allegedly a few number of days. And that's where we're trying to aim at. And then on the other hand, he had a picture of a guy on site with a nice 2D printed A3 sheet. And the reality is, if you wander around most of the sites in the region, that's what you see. So it's good to have an audacious goal, and that is what's required to drive the industry in a different direction. But the reality is, out on the ground at the moment, what starts off on a computer-aided design, 3D, 2D, whatever, is still ending up on the ground in print, and we have to move away from that.
Okay. And Sohail, now, Sean touched upon an interesting point when he said that as long as it's cheaper to build something using the current system, that's what's going to happen, because that's what the market dictates. So what would you say are some of the biggest obstacles facing the uptake of 3D printing technology, BIM technology as a whole? What would you say are some of the biggest obstacles that are being faced, and how do you address those issues?
I think if we look at any traditional change, if there is a change, there is an obstacle, there are challenges, because it's always disruptive in nature. And we have seen this in the BIM world, and we are seeing the same thing in 3D printing. People have been skeptical for some time, but we saw, as Sean mentioned, about the Chinese coming up with the building faster. What I believe is that we are in exciting times. Now, two things are going to drive the more and more innovation around 3D printing. One, we have got this mandate now, which by 2030, we want to have this percentage of the building 3D printed, which drives a big vision. Now, you have a goalpost there, you know where you are heading. Now, at the same time, construction industry is predominantly a low-margin industry, which Sean mentioned that it's driven by that, if it's going to be cheaper and all. So the cost, quality, and time has been always driving what is adopted in construction industry and what is probably rejected. And I think that's where the 3D printing is going to play a critical role. As we see the more and more the cost of materials for 3D printing and the equipment going down, it's going to really see more and more adoption. Now, since we have the goalpost, everyone is serious about it, we will see that it's transforming it at a very faster pace.
Okay. Now, Jeff, as a designer and as a consultant, you're often leading the sort of charge, so to speak. Now, some of the things that come up would be like, if you suggest to your client that you go down this route of 3D printing, you're gonna have a couple of questions from them in terms of the safety, in terms of the pros and cons that happen during construction itself. So how would you address those concerns?
I mean, if you're going to push it forward, you have to make sure that it can be done. First off, regulatory environment, I mean, probably the last thing to fall will be the municipal approvals. So you'd have to do a lot of work in advance to do that. In terms of just the basic cost effectiveness of it, as a design consultant, would we do this as a regular basis to your average client? No, we probably wouldn't be pushing the envelope. I mean, obviously what they did here in Dubai just recently with the world's first office center like that, okay, that's a special one-off thing. That will slowly start to trickle down honestly, as a consultant engineer, you're probably not going to try to push the envelope with all your clients. It's just not a good business model.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not really out to push that.
Okay. And Andy and Sean, I think maybe you guys could weigh in on this as well. With 3D printing, with BIM technology, as an architect, with you guys being architects, wouldn't it make it sort of allow you to push the boundaries a little bit in terms of what you can create and what you can design?
Definitely, yes. We've already seen how it's affected the software. I do personally think you shouldn't just be using digital technology to make crazy shapes. You have to look at the realistics of building and occupying space. Mm-hmm. But now we're going to start seeing it affecting fabrication. And I think also if you're just looking at printing whole buildings, the way innovation normally works, you start small, you experiment, you find what's successful, and you scale up. So one thing I'm working on at the moment is looking at 3D printing cladding and fusing that with casting technology to make mass production, to make it more cost effective. And from that, you can scale up. So the other thing is having a plan isn't always the best way. When you innovate, you have to experiment and not actually know where you're going to end up. And then you learn and you find out you're somewhere new. But the key is to start small. And they've started obviously with a little office here. Construction of a villa or smaller outbuildings or temporary offices is much more feasible target at the moment. And I think it's best to look at this, at 3D printing components, such as cladding or temporary housing, emergency housing, and then keep learning, scaling up. It's going to be a long time until somebody's 3D printing a whole tower or anything, but you need to look at what can you do right now in the next few years, and that means start small, start learning, get the cost down.
Okay. John, would you like to add to that, or?
No, I think what Jeff and Andy said is quite right. It's client-driven. No one's going to build an office tower that's 3D printed and be the first person to do it. It introduces a lot of risk. And at the end of the day, multi-million-pound projects is not where you want to sink in a load of risk. So, as Andy says, there's got to be some experimentation locally. Things have got to be developed on a small scale and then confidence built up. So we're not going to suddenly see 3D printed office buildings, coming up in Jebel Ali.
All right. Now, taking a little bit of a wider view as well, like we've got new technologies like obviously 3D printing, but then companies are starting to look at things like drones, robotics, automation to sort of help improve the efficiencies of things, but also to give a different viewpoint on projects as well. So how do you see the building site of the future how do you think the building site of the future is going to look like? And as a contractor, Sean, that would be something that would directly concern you. So would you be able to talk to us a little bit about implementing future technology on a building site?
I think the trick is to try and tap into things that already happen. So you mentioned the drone. Mm-hmm. That's something I think a lot of contractors already do. Drones are all of a sudden available to anybody off the shelf. We take drone footage of all of our projects just because it gives us good records of our projects. We can put them up in meetings with clients. We can take snapshots and talk about, certain areas of the job from a perspective that we never had before because it's a real picture of something from above and you can, figure out logistics and all of those things. So, those technologies have already found their way onto our sites. If you can start coupling that with, for example, the real-time, the scanning technology that actually starts to take as-built situations and you can import that into things like models, use it for progress. I think there are things like that can actually quite easily be tapped into because some of the supporting technology already exists.
Okay. So from a project management point of view, how does that affect you guys and someone like at KEO or at SSH or anything where you're actually trying to manage a project for a client? How do you incorporate all of those in?
Well, as quickly as you can if they're efficiency improvers, right? But again, it's the question of the technology can jump and hopscotch around, but you as an organization or as an industry in your relationships, you do need to move a little more measured pace, right? Mm-hmm. So obviously it's the low-hanging fruit that gets adopted first and the things that can easily be done, mm-hmm. and components in a building as opposed to saying a building. These type of things. That's how you do it. But you push it ahead as fast as your organization and as fast as your client base will allow because that is a good business model.
Okay.
I think with some of it, there's a little way to go as well. I mean, if we had a construction site with loads of people going around with Google Cardboard on their faces, there'd be a lot of accidents. The technology isn't quite there yet to be able to do what, some of the things even we saw earlier on. It's getting there, and when it does get there, it'll be very welcome, but there's a little way for some of these things to go yet.
Now, see, you raised an interesting point as well, because when you look at, some of the other construction markets in the GCC, places like Kuwait and, with Qatar and all of them, maybe they're not as progressive as the UAE market might be. How do you deal with something like that where you've got people are starting to make that first step over here in Dubai, but the market in Kuwait or the market in Qatar, they may be a lot more reluctant to do that?
Yeah, I think if you talk to clients in different regions, they probably argue that point.
Yeah.
We may agree that the UAE is probably slightly ahead of the curve in terms of forward thinking. But really that brings the benefits. I mean, we do, I know Jeff does as well, and KO operate across multiple geographies. So we can bring the benefits of that to those markets, and that's what we seek to do.
Okay. And Sohail, I think you've got something to...
I think, can we wait until the technology is mature enough? Probably not, because we are losing a lot of potential which is available today. I think we have an option here that can we start thinking loud? Can we start looking at these technologies and these disruptions really contributing to the benefit of ours? Starting with the drone, we can start saying what kind of machines we need to process the point cloud which drone is going to bring, or it's just going to bring the pictures. What we start seeing at the things on the side, the customers we are talking about at the global scale, is the lines are blurring between the virtual world and the physical world. And that's what is bringing the value to the clients, the contractors, and the designers. Now imagine a scenario that you had built a BIM model of your infrastructure which you are building. When it was in the design stage, designers were using VR technologies to visualize it, how end client or end user basically is going to engage into this infrastructure, how they are going to consume this infrastructure. That's a good start. But once this BIM model goes to a contractor, he has a different challenges. He needs to use this information with his site team. And the drones come into the play. Drones actually can start pulling in the data day-to-day basis or weekly basis, the progress on the site. One way is you can look at the pictures and say, wow, so this is how much we have done. Fair enough. It's a good stakeholder tool. But if you are able to overlay that information on your project plan, a digital world or the digital model of it, and then suddenly you realize, oh, we are missing subtle components here. We are not following the schedule as planned, or there are some challenges, potential challenges in the coming 2 weeks. And suddenly you have the weather data coming in because there's a storm going to come into the play. So these are the things which will help us do those proactive actions or mitigation activities to help us stay on the schedule, or in most of the cases, even reduce the schedule. It's up to us how much we want to leverage these technologies while they are emerging, quote unquote. I wouldn't say they are still at that nascent stage, but yes, from the exposure, from the pool of talent, and from the usage of it, they are in the early stages.
Okay. Andy, how would you respond to that then? Like in terms of how would you respond to the points that Sohail made then about...
Well, I want to come back to the construction side, the hard side. I think most people would agree that there's going to be less people on the building site, but it's unsure if it's going to take 5, 10, 15, 20 years for all this robotics to kick in. And I think the software side, because I know it's not cheap, but it's a lot cheaper than building a building. These things are happening much quicker, yep. And it's a different kind of momentum to get things moving, and it's easy to get people excited. It's relatively low cost, low barrier, and I mean, so it's just a question of scale and momentum, and we're trying to do all these things in the office, and each time you do it, you learn a bit more, and it's always sort of feeding in what can be done, trying it, getting a bit better. By the time you're doing it, it's moved on and catching up.
I think you brought a very important point. Keep getting people excited. Really letting people know that this change, this disruption is not really challenging them into their day-to-day, but rather contributing and making the life easy. If we try to solve all the problems what we have today with a piece of technology or anything, that might not be a thing. But if people are excited and start consuming what is available, I think that's the way forward.
Okay. All right. Now, one of the bigger trends that we've seen as well is that there is a clear movement towards automation. And, people have started to say that, the projects of the future will actually be built off-site and then delivered to site. As a contractor, Sean, how does that, how do you view something like that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think that's the real future of construction. I think the more we can see of that, the better. I think off-site construction, for many, many reasons, we've all heard the benefits, but I mean, things like being able to prepare things way ahead of time, delivery on time, you don't need storage on site, you're not creating a lot of waste that you've got to take off-site, so again, it helps with the environmental issues. Quality is always going to be way better because you're doing work over and over in a controlled environment. But again, it comes back to the beginning of the job. If you don't initially set out to do a project with an off-site construction philosophy, it can't happen, it won't happen. The owner needs to say, this is what I want. The designer needs to sell it. And then it needs to make its way to the contractor. So, we always finding ourselves looking at jobs saying, there's 200 of the same bathrooms in this job. It's just screaming out for doing bathroom pods, But it's always just too late in the process to be able to turn that around, and we leave it. Whereas, we're always saying, if only somebody had designed this for pods, it would have been great, So, absolutely, off-site construction for me is the future. It's the next step to see more of that, but it's again got to be driven from the front end.
Okay, and as one of the leading contractors in the region, Alec, how is Alec sort of approaching this and sort of preparing itself for what's coming in the market then?
Look, I mean, the reality is that I think most contractors are not. You never really have proper insight as to what project's coming next. So you don't know what kind of job you're going to win next. What are the constraints of that job? What are the specific requirements? So, and again, I mean, to set yourself up as a contractor that has a huge facility to do off-site modularization, you may not get to use it for 2 years, unless you get a suitable project. So, I think until the industry starts to consistently go that way, contractors won't do it. They will simply look at what comes next, look at what they've got on their plate once they've won the project, and then do the best they can with what they've got.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jeff, would you like to comment on that?
Oh, I think that's a very pragmatic and realistic answer. I think the entire, all the way up through is about the same way. I gave a very similar response as you adopt when you can, and you don't really know what the client's going to bring to you. Mm-hmm. And so the very initial thing about the need for a lot of the regulatory environment can start to push these things forward, right? I mean, for a long time, prefabrication was not like a popular building technique here in this region, right? I mean, they were just locked in, low-cost labor, post and beam and block and all that was kind of the way to go. To push that forward, you'd really have to have a real economic reason for it.
Yeah, okay. Now, let's take a little bit of a wider view to things where, there's the UAE's, Dubai has made a definite step towards becoming a smart city. And, the Internet of Things is something that's gaining in prominence over here. How critical a role do you see technology playing, particularly these disruptive technologies that you're talking about, Sohail, towards achieving the smart cities goal? And how are we going to see it, sort of impact not just construction itself, but infrastructure planning and, city planning on a whole and future planning as well?
I think the first important factor to understand is the smart city cannot be built by own. Every stakeholder has to play a role, starting from client to contractor to designer, even a buildings material manufacturer. Everyone has to play a role in it. The end goal in the smart city is that it is really eco-friendly. It's about the social life, a better quality of life for our kids and the grandkids, which we are going to hand over this planet to. Now, where these disruptive technologies play a role is helping us reduce the waste, helping us innovate and experiment. We don't have to invest money today to experiment the different innovations which a designer has in his mind, because he can use the technologies like generative design, see that this is my goal I want to achieve from sustainability, from the design perspective, and so on and so forth. The computer goes back and uses some of the algorithms in the background and comes up with 100 design options, which helps designers to really pick 3 of them and play with them rather than looking at it from a drawing or a model perspective.
So that's generative design.
That's the generative design. Now, once he identified 3 design options, he can pick them and really run some energy analysis on top of it further, optimize them from the safety perspective, the building as possibility perspective, local materials perspective. Once that analysis is done, he might shoot out few 3D prints of it of at least a nominal scale for the end clients to come and contribute to that. Say that how do they feel about it? How do they react to all of this? So they might bring in some kids and say, how do you feel tomorrow living in this infrastructure? So you start innovations, you start these options without really hitting the ground. Once you identified something, you will have an outcome which has got the best brains, best idea from the designer's perspective, the contribution from the contractor's perspective, and the requirements of the end user and the client. Because that's what is going to build a smart city. Because if we just say it's a connected world, it's an battery-operated automobile, and so on and so forth, if it is not contributing to a better quality of life in 5 years or 10 years when this infrastructure is going to be consumed, I would say it's an infrastructure. That's what a smart city is for the end, eco-friendly, a social, high quality, and a better quality of life. That's what I would say. And that's where Autodesk has been in the leading front of it, building these technologies and providing these tools for our community to help them really leverage these tools.
Okay. And Sean and Andy, you guys, and Jeff as well, you guys are all master planners as well, like when you're working on these projects. And obviously the work that you do ties into the bigger picture in terms of a smart city. So how are you using technology to help work towards the larger goal of having a smart city by the year 2030 or the year 2020 or whatever?
Here, I'll have a run at this because I am a city planner. My take, I love smart city. I love the concept of it. I love the fact that it's entirely amorphous as a term. It can mean anything. There's no point where you go, hey, we're a smart city. But what it has to do for me is as much as about integration of legacy systems and technologies and the introduction of the new and trying to fit that together. Mm-hmm. If I was an operator of any of the basic infrastructure services, I would see so many things, so many ways to better run my business. And then if you layer those on top of each other, and you can knit them together, then you have a better way to run a city on a rolling basis. Because don't forget, a city, here in Dubai, it's new and flashy, but most cities are 85, 90% legacy. And to pull those up into some kind of a more efficient operating manner where you can really be ecological and all this kind of good stuff, that's the task of thousands for years and decades. So it all comes, but it's not as neat and pretty as a building might be, right? It's a lot messier and bigger.
Yeah. Andy?
Yeah, there's no one thing you can point to that says this is going to be the tipping point for this is the technology that's going to make all the difference. It's small pieces of innovation everywhere that get incorporated into everything these days. So it's not you can't just point to one thing and say it's going to be this or it's going to be that. It's small incremental changes, and they will reach then a tipping point where we say, oh, we're now doing something completely differently. But again, it's not pointable to just one particular aspect. It's a combination of effects. It's a combination of technologies that are used in what we do.
Do you want to add to that, or do you?
I was going to add that when we work on master plans, and we talked about trying to raise the quality of life for the city is the bigger goal of any city, and we're working on projects within that. And we often talk about efficiency with the client because they want to be efficient. And but it's not just seen as sort of commercial efficiency. They want to get the best value for money. But we always try and think that when you're being efficient, you're really being efficient with all your resources, with time, the maintenance once it's built, and all this is how it all comes together. You're trying to be as efficient in how your place works to get the best quality of life, quality of use for the end users and the public realm from it. So we try to use these tools in that way. We want to say, okay, what is the way to get the best out of this place and the best of the resources we're using that we're putting in to create it.
Okay. And, one of the big things about smart cities is also about the data sharing and using the cloud to your benefit as well. And collating data and using it to improve your plans or your future build. Now, how do you go about sort of like convincing people that the cloud is the way forward now? And like, because especially in this region where there's a bit of a reluctance to share information and you'll be a little bit more transparent with things. How do you address that challenge then? So, that's Sean. I think Sean's got something
It's
to
a
say.
great question. When you find the answer, will you let me know, please? It is a challenge. I mean, again, it's small incremental changes that people see the benefit from is going to be the way forward. There is this thing, especially regionally, there's a big reticence to actually let data outside people's control. But unless we start adopting those things, unless we start showing people the benefit of it, again, it's going to come in small waves. There's not going to be a big tsunami of it. It's going to be lots and lots of small incremental changes where people suddenly realize that everything they do is benefiting from having data in the cloud, from some of the things we've seen today about using the cloud power to generate all these different designs. It's not just about having them because they've been done before. It's also about using the power of the cloud, which you couldn't possibly have as a single company or organization. It's those sorts of things which will slowly build in people's confidence, I think.
Okay. Great. Does anyone want to add to that? Or, okay.
I think, Gavin, I want to really definitely talk about a little bit. Construction industry is a complex industry. We have a lot of stakeholders. Leave aside the one organization to another, from designer to handover of the data or the content or the information to contractor to the client. There are a lot of stakeholders. Within the organizations also, we have seen our clients having challenges really sharing the data. I think most of my colleagues here will agree on that, because data lies into the silos. Each department is working on some piece of information, building the data, and at some point of time, if it is regulated, they share it to the things. But by the time the other stakeholder starts playing with it, they have developed it further. What clouds brings to the table is that shyness, that's breaking those silos. It brings the data at the center of it, which we probably saw in the previous video, and Matt talked about it, that the project stays at the center of it. Everyone contributes to the information and the data, and everyone consumes from the same source. When you have one source to consume and contribute, that breaks down a big deal of silos. Is it going to be the end of all the challenges we have? No, probably not. But to a great deal, we would know that this is one source where I have to contribute to, and this is one source I have to consume from. That's going to mitigate some of the risks for us, because it will make sure everyone has got the right information at the right time based on their right access to define the security protocol around it.
Okay, great. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the processes that companies like you guys go through when you're implementing BIM. I mean, we've moved past a stage where BIM is just considered to be for design and build or planning or anything like that. It's more about the processes throughout an entire organization, and it touches upon things like collaboration, transparency, information sharing. So how are you guys setting up your companies to sort of be more in line with what BIM requires you to be? Jeff, could you?
I mean, it's a microcosm of the outside world, right? Is that you've got different disciplines, different areas, different departments and divisions that have sort of operated in isolation. And it's the same process of breaking them down. I mean, technology is an enabler, but in essence, it's the organization, it's the workflows, it's the structures, and it's the mentality of the people that hey, we're moving into this new age where, you don't live in your little box anymore, sort of live in a bigger sandbox now. And so it is I mean, the progress you make, you rise up, you hit a plateau, you solve that next problem, you move up. The progress can be fairly rapid, but it's not linear. And you just keep chipping away at it. How do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? You just keep moving.
Okay. Sean and Andy, would you like to jump in?
I mean, I agree with Jeff. You just got to keep going at it, and it's the answer's not always in technology. Technology gives us lots of tools that make us better and more efficient, but we've all seen two guys sitting next to each other in the office emailing each other. There's still a role to play for actually getting up and sitting in a room and discussing things in an animated and collaborative way that doesn't depend on the technology, and we mustn't lose sight of that. And as we work across regions now, across disciplines in different parts of the world, which a lot of us do, we mustn't just depend on the technology. The technology is an enabler to an end, but that interaction is just as important, and actually it's a downside of the technology. It makes that almost inconvenient to have to go and speak to someone. We mustn't lose sight of that.
Sean, as a contractor, you'd probably be coming in from a completely different angle. So how do you view it then?
Yeah, I think the reality is anybody in the industry will find it difficult to answer that question, because I think we're at a stage where we're figuring out how we use this technology and our processes, and I think we're all too busy worrying about fitting this new technology into our existing processes. And I mean, we were talking earlier about disruptive technology. I mean, the question is, what is it going to disrupt? I mean, we've got this great technology. I think the real disruption is going to come in the way we structure projects, how projects actually happen. So, we've got this quite old system, I think, in the industry of the client wants to do something, he gets a consultant on board, some work gets done, they go out, they go and do more design, they engage with the contractor, the form of contracts, the commercial setup. I think that's where we're going to see the disruption. I think we're headed for a much more collaborative approach. I think one of the guys was saying that. I think that's what it's all about. It's about people actually being able to communicate much quicker, a lot easier with each other. And I think it's going to break down a lot of the existing structures and forms of contract that we see. And I think it's empowering a lot of people to participate in stages of a construction project that they would not have otherwise been involved in. So I think the arena of a project is going to look very different in the future. I think that's where we're going to see the disruption. I think we're going to see clients being a lot more involved. I think you're going to see contractors being involved from concept, those sorts of things.
Okay.
I think I just wanted to add something. Sean brought a couple of very interesting points, like what he said, the arena of construction is going to look different. Undoubtedly, 5 years from now, it will be different. And we have already started seeing some of the trends where actually contractors are invited at the concept level only to contribute their insight and experience to optimize. One of the important things which is going to be driver for us in the region is traditionally the project schedules in the region have been very aggressive, very aggressive. We have been very limited time for designers to plan and a very limited time for contractor to plan on these things. I think these technologies will help us do that planning piece faster so that the execution is within the same timelines. Region has been very aggressive on the schedules. Every time I meet customers, this is common theme in the region.
Okay, great. All right, so let's talk a little bit about 3D scanning. And it's being used more and more by architects and contractors, around the world to sort of save money by reducing errors and, time on site, in terms of measurements. How do you see that changing in regional companies? Andy, would you be able to talk to me about that?
So we haven't really used 3D scanning here yet, and in this region, a lot of the sites are empty. There was one big site we were looking at, and if we'd gone ahead, we would have done a survey by drone, just because of the scale of it. But I think in other regions where there's a much denser urban fabric and old buildings and things, there's a lot of value in scanning and keeping it on record for the future as well as for doing the building. But so here we haven't got so involved yet. The other use, obviously, is in-house. If you're doing handmade physical models, which some architects still do as a design process, and scanning it in. So with all the tools now, we tend to design on the flat screen, even when it's spinning around. And it's nice to see something in the real world. As a 3D print, you see it. But sometimes you can start. We had a project once where we made a site model, and we made a model of all the BUA we knew would be on the site, and then you can actually arrange it on. Okay. So that it allows you to get back into the real world and go back and forth with the digital, which I think is very interesting. Because if you only stick in the flat world, you can lose something.
All right. And Sean, as a contractor, how does this impact you as well, the technology with 3D scanning? Is that something that you guys are looking at using?
It is. I mean, and that's exactly the problem. That the point was being made is availability in the region. I mean,
Yeah.
we've used it on projects where we've got very complex MEP and baggage handling installations we've done in existing facilities. So, I mean, the power of being able to scan an area in 3D, all of the existing services, import it into a model, and then 3D model around that is extremely powerful. But the, the costs have limitations at the moment. So it's very costly to get that done, but a very powerful tool if you can use it. And we've seen the benefits of it. So I think we do need to try and use it more. But I think the more things are modeled and as-built models are produced as a way of life, I think we might even find that becomes less of an issue, because the more accurate these things become as projects are built, when we're using BIM properly through the life of a project, you may find that becomes less of an issue.
Okay, great. Is there anything else you guys would like to add? All right, so we're coming to the end now, but so I want to throw open one last question, and that's to all of you. So if we could go down the line and sort of have you guys tell me your thoughts on this. But traditionally, designers have always been challenged to explain design in their head, the designs in their head in 3 dimensions, to someone that doesn't really have technical training, meaning your client for the most part over here. How do you see 3D printing addressing this challenge, and what additional benefits do you think 3D printing will bring to end clients? Jeff, can you?
I mean, I think you pretty much answered your own question in the sense of it will allow people who aren't necessarily all that spatially gifted to really truly see and feel what they're getting. It's a fantastic marketing tool. I think it has some value to the design process, but I think it's sort of quicker and easier just to introduce it on the client. That's one client-facing type of a tool that's it's a no-brainer really.
Well, I've found often some clients who may be running a huge company, but they've never been involved in a building before, and even a plan and certainly a section is quite abstract for them. And a still image can also be not a best representation. The two best ways I've found for a client, and especially someone not in the industry, to understand what you're proposing, is one, a physical model, and two, an animation, when they see it moving and they understand the three-dimensionality. But if you don't have 3D printing and you had a big model, it could easily take 3 or 4 weeks to make, and you may only have 3 or 4 weeks to do a competition or something. Yeah. So when you can print a model overnight and show the client, that's a huge advantage.
Okay.
I think Andy summed it up. It's a miniature model or the physical models are not new to the design world. They build them to really understand and optimize the design, and they build to show it to the clients. But what will change probably going forward is that they will be able to produce multiple options for client to choose in the physical world, rather than there are 5 options with the digital photographs of something, and here is one physical. An unfortunate thing in most of those cases was also the physical model which got approved and the one which got built was not always the same, because it evolved. 3D printing reduces that time, helps design community to come up with the options faster.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say forget 3D printing, go straight to the visualization, straight to the VR technologies when they're available. They're far more impressive and far quicker to manipulate than you can do changes on the fly. If a client doesn't like the color of something, you can change it. You can change the color of the glass in the entire building in seconds. So that's going to be far more powerful from 3D. 3D's last year, forget it.
Okay. Sean, closing remarks?
Yeah, I think most of the points have been made. I think definitely the visualization thing is a strong plus point. But I think also the first point where, time is always an issue on these projects. So if you are 3D printing as a process, so for example, we know we're going to be 3D printing a lot of the stuff in a factory, assembling and bringing to site. What it does do is that it allows time for things to be properly figured out from a design point of view, not rush it, really understand what the client wants, print samples quite quickly, So I think it'll add a lot of value from that point of view.
Okay, great. I think that brings us to the end of the panel discussion. We'll be opening the floor up to some questions for the experts. So if you've got any questions, please put your hand up and we'll get a mic to you and you can take it from there. Great.
Easy ones, please.
Would anyone like to ask any questions? Or?
Oh, you know you've done a good job, Wayne.
There's right in the front row, please.
Thank you very much. It was very nice. I'm so close there. But I just was wondering about the cost of the 3D scanner. Where is the cost? Is it in the scanner or the modern or the equipment? You mentioned that this technology is still very expensive to use. So I just wondering.
Yeah, I think, you know, from what we understand, the equipment is relatively expensive, but I think once you've got the equipment and you're getting it to use, I think you can start to dilute that cost. I think it's like anything in the world. You know, if there's only a few people that do it, it's always going to be a lot more costly. There isn't really any competition, I think, is the main problem. So, I mean, what we found when we tried to get check prices, you know, get a few quotes to see if we could get a better option, it just really wasn't available. There's almost nobody that does it. So that's the issue. I think when it starts to get used more widely and more people are doing it, like anything in the world, it will become more competitive and more cheaper.
Hello. Sorry, I'm here. Karthik. I'm just wondering, this 3D printing, does it print all those cable, ducts, AC, diffusers and all, or just the skeleton?
Sorry, could you repeat the question, please?
Sorry. No, I'm just wondering that this 3D printing machine, does it print only the structures, or it does include all the cables and ducts or whatever the electrical equipments and stuff as well?
Okay, let's get one thing simple. So 3D, you can print pretty much anything or everything as a 3D print. It depends what your digital file says. Now, there are still a limitation in the materials which we have available today you can use for printing. As we see the progress in the material developments, we will probably print more. So now the question is, can I print a wire or a cable in copper? If my printer allows me to print in the copper, I can. Can I print a duct? Yes, if I am able to plot in aluminum or the sheet metal, I can. So it doesn't matter what form. The form is a digital file, so you can have it done. It's just the materials you choose and what's the output of it. So printers are capable of printing anything today. It's just the materials as we start seeing more and more of them coming out.
The building in Dubai is 3D printing as a type of concrete, but there is work being done in 3D printing metal. And so that means if you start printing steel beams like this, being printed rather than rolled is a completely different way of constructing things. And I think people are building bridges in Europe with this technology and also smaller things. But at the moment, it's different things are happening in printing, and they can come together in a building.
No good, no bad, like they say. We do believe in technology, though. When I came here to Middle East 3 years ago, it was like time traveling, but not forward, but backward. I have two plastic pieces in my pocket. One is Emirates ID, another is Estonian ID card. One of them is smart. Isn't it so that we have a problem applying these fascinating technologies because we don't know who is the author of the model that will be given to a 3D printer? Is there a proper quality assurance checking, and who is taking the responsibility? In Europe, we have established laws about digital IDs and made them equal to handwritten signatures.
I think UAE and this region and also other countries need to follow. Otherwise, until we keep using the rubber stamps, we cannot really unleash the power of these technologies.
That's a very good point made. So, would anyone like to respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're 100% correct. I agree with you, and that's sort of what the point I was trying to make earlier, is where will this disruption occur? I mean, we've got all these fantastic technologies. Where will we see the disruption? And that's exactly where it needs to take place. It needs to take place in the way people think about things, the way things are contractually, commercially, legally structured. I think there needs to be a real mind shift on how we physically go about things in order to suit ourselves to the technology. The new technology cannot be forced into everyday life the way we do it today. And I think that's not only true for construction, I think it's, as you say, true for many, many things.
Hello, Tarek. I'm an architect, so for me, Autodesk is the tool I use to design. So whatever Autodesk come up with, this is what I use. And this is what I can do with this tool. So for me, I think that the building itself now is, it didn't change 20 years ago. It's the same concept. Floors, walls, lights. So what Autodesk is doing now is great when we talk about connectivity, details, everything is connected, yes. But I think we need more. We need something more. We need to change the concept of the wall, not to detail it. We need to think about energy more. We had only like 10% of this, event about energy and eco designs, which is, I think, is the most important, because when we look here around these buildings, it's all glass, it's all buildings materials that are really not efficient for the environment. So that's it. Do you agree with me with this? Or what do you think is the thing that Autodesk should play in the future of building concept?
All right. I think, thank you very much for being Autodesk, customer. That's really appreciated. We have been doing a lot. Today's event was not really about sustainability. We run the events for sustainability also, where we showcase the investments and the technologies we have been really investing in to help designers like yours to evaluate your designs from the sustainability, materials, and everything around it. We recently announced a few months early this year a tool called Inside 360, basically where you can throw out your BIM model. It just details out all those reports from the sustainability perspective, not only during the construction, but throughout the project life cycle, basically. That how much of energy is going to be consumed by this infrastructure over a period of next 50 years and potential possibilities of reducing it. That's one which is now. And in the beginning, we talked about generative design, which is the goal-based design. In the generative design, one of the capabilities is that you can define these quote-unquote, eco parameters, that I want the materials to be used when you are giving me the options back. Give me the options based on these materials. So you set a goal for the design, our generative design tool. You can say, I want you to orient the building because this is located in Dubai, and I want you to consume the sun for my solar panels, but provide me the shade where I can save. So all those goals you can define into generative design, and when system comes back with the options, it would have considered them while giving you those options. So we as Autodesk are continuously investing on these technologies which will help the sustainability design, construction, and the operations of the building. Net, we are constantly aware of that. We are investing in it. I can talk to you a little bit more in detail, but the goal underlining thing within Autodesk, whenever we design a tool, it is just for this simple reason. We have to help our clients, you all, basically, to imagine, create, and build a better world. That's the thing. If it is, you are talking about generative design, it is gold on that. You talk about Insight 360 or collaboration platform, it's driven by that. All right?
I'd like Andy to jump in on this point as well, because obviously as an architect yourself, you're looking at, evolving the way we design buildings and the way buildings function. So what would you want from from this technology to help you achieve your goals better in terms of sustainability?
Is it for me?
No, that's for Andy.
Andy, okay.
Having any analysis that relates to the real world, solar, etc., is very useful. I'd like to say some things in defense of glass, because it is everywhere here. One of the best things in using glass here is that it's very easy to clean. And this building still looks very, very fresh because it's got glass. If it was in GRC, stone precast, there's so much dust in the air, things start to look tired and dusty in effect very quickly. And glass, it can be very high tech. It can be spandrel, obviously. It can be tinted in such a way that it's quite efficient. If you have a good engineer, you can still have a pretty good, efficient glass building, and it's always going to look shiny and new. I also think that solar technology in the next 10 years is going to make the energy debate completely different. And we'll be looking at efficiencies in different ways. So I'm not totally against glass building. I prefer stone, but maybe just at ground level, I think.
Okay, great. I think that's all we've got time for. And maybe one more question, and then we call it a day.
Yeah, okay. Hello. My name is Raju. I'm from Langerock. Just a question to Suhail. And since, first of all, I have to thank you, all of you guys, to give us such a good opportunity to share knowing about the interesting facts about the building of things. Just a question to Suhail. Since we are talking about the technology interfaces, I think when we talk about any software, the first instance it goes to the architects, because they are the designers who will utilize it. When it comes to the contractor side, because I am from the contractor side, since we have using this BIM technology from the UK, just I want to know, rating 10 as the maximum, how you feel that contractors from the UAE business, how much percentage they are getting used to this technology for developing the constructions, and how you feel the future aspects. Since we are talking about 2030 will be 25% of the BIM 3D printing technology is going to implement. How you feel at present the thing is? That's my question.
Thank you, Raju. Just a little brief. I worked for Langerock for 1.5 years in past, but that's a different discussion. I think we discussed asking the easy questions. This is the most tough one. So I will actually have to rely on Sean to give you the numbers from the contractor's perspective. But what I can tell you that pretty much every contracting firm I am meeting today, they are using technologies, particularly the BIM. It's just the varying level of maturity. Now, there is a difference you need to understand. One, there have been the firms who invested into this journey because they wanted to lead the way. The firms who said, okay, tomorrow I need to really be on the leading front also because I am today leading. They started investing in it and they started riding this tide. So there are firms like that. Then there are the firms who were actually the followers, who are being now trying to catch up because now municipality mandate has come in, owners are asking for it, designer is asking for the better coordination, and their margins are shrinking and the market is getting more and more competitive. Those are the followers. So there's a very varied level of maturity across the contracting firms within the region. I can tell you from Saudi to Qatar and UAE and everywhere, this is the varying level. It wouldn't be fair from my side if I put a rating on there, all right? So, but what I can foresee is that next 5 years, we will see that BIM is going to be the center of the construction by default because the silos are breaking, cloud is coming into the play, and contractors are seeing the benefit of it, that if this digital model is accessible to everyone on the site and anything changing or communicating is being using this tool, that's where the help is. Like Sean talked about drones being used for the capturing the as-is conditions of the building. So those values are more driving the contractors to use it than just, it's being mandated. More and more they see the value. I think, Sean, you want to add on it? I think you will probably give a more on-ground thing.
No, I agree, and I think we contractors are getting a lot better, a lot quicker, and I think it won't be long before we see contractors actually leading the way in terms of BIM and starting to dictate how it's used and how well it's used. And that's where I was talking about where I think we'll see the disruption. Because if you just think of the life of, for example, the 3D model, I mean, in this region specifically, the emphasis on detailed shop drawings is very heavy with the contractors. That's what we see. So, we take on board an LOD 300 model, we start working with it, and we have an awful lot of interface with that model. We further develop a lot of detail, we take it all the way through to FM, so we're actually getting to know the technology very, very well, very quickly. So I think today, probably, I'll give you a number, 5, but I think it won't be long before many of the contractors are going to be right up there.
When we bid for projects, so we receive RFPs, I'd say about 80% of them now, as in the last 6 months, where the client is specifically asking for a BIM model, and they're saying to include it in your proposal. And ideally, we do all our projects in BIM anyway. There's occasions when we can't, but even that, and as DM, we need to do BIM submissions as well, but not other authorities. But from this, so just from the client demand, the projects that we might be finishing in a year's time and getting ready for site, almost all of them are going to have a good BIM model. So it's a question then of how do we share this, how do we work with the contractor, because they often actually want to remodel it themselves so that they fully own it, or is there a better way to do that? But so from the architecture side, almost all projects that we're doing now will be in BIM, or certainly out the pipeline in a year.
Great. I think that's all we've got time for. Could you join me in giving a big...
Can I say something? So one last question, if that's okay. As this principally is Autodesk making a presentation of all their software suites, how are Autodesk going to assist all of the parties that participate in producing the buildings themselves with ownership and change? Because what we have is developers producing a virtual model, then that gets handed over, or contractors are expected to participate in producing working drawings that they then use. And what Autodesk are also expecting to happen thereafter is that as an asset, the asset is readily identifiable in an as-built tool. Where is the Autodesk participating in this change of transfer of information and acceptance of the model's ownership?
Okay. Well, I think Autodesk is aware of our role, and we predominantly have been a company who is democratizing the technology for the industry. That's the goal. We will continue to provide you the tools which will help you to do these tasks and probably mitigate some risks and reduce some time. I don't know if we will be taking the direct responsibility into the day-to-day projects roles. What we have been doing in this owner-operator model, if you are saying that as built and how this information is being translated from the as built to the owner-operator space, we work closely with other software vendors who are providing you the softwares for operations and maintenance, like IBM's Maximo, FM, Archibus, FM systems, and so on and so forth, to help really iron out the challenges from transferring the data from the BIM model to these facility management softwares. That's what we have been constantly working closely with these vendors to make your life easy to a great extent. Now the question is it smooth today? No, it's not. Is it because of technology? Probably not, because there's a change happening in the industry. There's a change which needs to happen in the way or the processes we do things. It's like this: if you do not define those parameters which the owner-operator is going to need it to manage that facility into the BIM model, all he's going to get is the contracting information or the design information. Now, there is the liability on the owner side to help you understand those requirements in the beginning. So that change is evolving. From the technology perspective, we are constantly improving, investing into these technologies, and working with other software vendors who are really critical for this overall asset life cycle.